Chaos erupted in a Los Angeles courtroom this morning as Arnold Schwarzenegger faced off with a notoriously biased judge after arriving late to testify in a high-stakes corporate fraud trial involving his former business partner. What unfolded next shocked the nation. The doors to courtroom 7 slammed open at exactly 10:42 a.m., 42 minutes past the scheduled start time, and in walked Arnold Schwarzenegger, shoulders squared, jaw set, and eyes burning with urgency. He wasn't just late. He was about to step into a political firestorm no one saw coming. The courtroom, packed with journalists, legal aides, and tense attorneys, turned to face him. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but whispers were already leaking out into the hallway, where reporters huddled with notepads and phones. Schwarzenegger's sudden entrance might have been dramatic, but what happened next was downright seismic. Arnold had been subpoenaed to testify in the People vs. Landon Fisk, a billion-dollar fraud case implicating his former business partner, the real estate tycoon known for sprawling developments in Miami and Dubai. Arnold had invested with Fisk years ago, not knowing Fisk was orchestrating an elaborate shell game. Prosecutors didn't believe Schwarzenegger was involved, but his testimony as a character witness could either destroy or save Fisk's entire defense. Yet his lateness wasn't just Hollywood arrogance. I received an urgent call from the VA hospital. My foundation sponsors a trauma recovery unit there. One of our veterans had a medical emergency and asked to speak with me. I stayed until I knew he was stable, Arnold explained to the court. Upon arrival, voice gravelly but composed. But the judge wasn't moved. Presiding over the trial was the Honorable Judge Everett Langford, a man known for his stern demeanor and staunch conservative views. He leaned over the bench, piercing eyes glaring at Schwarzenegger as he tapped a thick pen against the hardwood. "This is a courtroom, not a film set, Mr. Schwarzenegger," Judge Langford barked. "You do not waltz in late, draped in excuses, no matter how noble you claim them to be. You're held in contempt of court. A fine of $25,000 is imposed immediately." Gasps spread through the room. Arnold stood still, not out of shock, but calculation. He looked up, meeting Langford's gaze, not with defiance, but a razor-sharp awareness that something deeper was playing out here. He didn't need a script to recognize when a role had shifted. "Your Honor," he began carefully, "I respect the court, but this fine feels less like enforcement and more like punishment rooted in something else. I came here in good faith." "This isn't about tardiness," Langford cut him off. "Sit down and keep your opinions out of this courtroom. You're not the governor anymore. This isn't politics." But it was. The air shifted. Everyone knew it. Only 2 days earlier, Arnold had appeared on CNN, endorsing Kamala Harris for president. It was a bold move, unexpected even, but not without intention. Arnold had grown increasingly vocal about the state of American politics, warning against extremism and calling for leadership grounded in empathy. His comments had gone viral, and clearly they hadn't gone unnoticed by Judge Langford, a known critic of Harris and self-declared originalist when it came to constitutional law. That undercurrent, political tension thinly veiled as legal procedure, began to rise like smoke in the courtroom. As Arnold took the witness stand, even the defense attorney, Sheila Kamdar, raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" she whispered. Arnold nodded. But his mind wasn't just on Fisk anymore. It was on the judge. The examination began, but Judge Langford's interruptions came like clockwork. Objections sustained without reason. Testimony cut short. Even minor clarifications denied. Every move Arnold made was met with obstruction. By midday recess, it was clear. This wasn't just a courtroom, it was a battlefield. In the hallway outside, murmurs had become declarations. "Did you see that exchange? He's baiting him." "Langford's gunning for Schwarzenegger." Reporters scrambled to get statements, but Arnold declined. His calm was unnerving. Too calm, as if waiting for the right moment to strike. Back inside after lunch, the tension snapped. As Arnold began detailing how Fisk managed corporate funds, Langford interrupted again, accusing him of grandstanding and injecting opinion. That's when Arnold turned slowly, deliberately, to face the bench. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he said, voice low and deliberate, "I've cooperated fully with this court. I'm not here to grandstand. I'm here under subpoena, telling the truth. But if my endorsement of a Democratic candidate has any bearing on how I'm treated today, then this is no longer a courtroom. It's a political arena disguised as justice." Gasps again. Langford's gavel slammed. "You're dangerously close to being removed from this courtroom." Arnold leaned forward. "Then remove me. But know this, I won't be the only one asking questions about what's really happening in this courtroom." The judge stared back, momentarily rattled. Suddenly the trial was no longer about Landon Fisk. It was about something much larger: bias, power, and the invisible fault lines cracking beneath the American legal system. Outside, protesters had already begun to gather. Hashtags were trending. "A justice or judgment," "Stand with Arnold," or "Courtroom bias." But inside Courtroom 7, the storm was just beginning. The judge had no idea the man he tried to humiliate would become the symbol of a legal reckoning. By the time court reconvened that afternoon, Courtroom 7 felt like a powder keg. Word of the confrontation had rippled far beyond the courthouse. Clips of courtroom sketch artists' depictions of Arnold, jaw clenched, eyes locked with the judge, flooded social media. Every media outlet from CNN to The Guardian had broken the story wide open. There were no cameras in the courtroom, but in the age of viral outrage, none were needed. Judge Everett Langford, however, acted as though nothing had changed. His gavel struck wood with the same controlled aggression, his tone just as clipped, his disdain for Arnold even sharper. "We will proceed," he announced, eyes deliberately avoiding Schwarzenegger's. But the air was different now. The jury noticed. So did the attorneys. So did the gallery. Arnold didn't just return to the witness stand, he owned it. His calm presence wasn't an act of bravado. It was a challenge. Every word he spoke became a protest against the unspoken, politicized agenda unfolding before the public's eyes. Defense counsel Sheila Kamdar resumed her line of questioning. "Mr. Schwarzenegger, could you clarify the nature of your initial investment with Mr. Fisk?" Arnold nodded, voice clear, steady. "I invested in 2009. Fisk Ventures promised sustainable development projects in underdeveloped areas. I believed in the vision. Were you aware of any fraudulent financial activities?" "No. The first time I heard about misappropriated funds was during the FBI's initial inquiry." Before Kamdar could follow up, Langford cut in. "That will be stricken from the record. The witness is editorializing." Kamdar spun toward the bench. "Your Honor, the witness is answering a direct question." Langford raised an eyebrow. "He is injecting personal impressions." Arnold interjected calmly. "I'm providing the timeline as I experienced it. That's what a witness does, isn't it?" Langford's lips twitched into something close to a sneer. "You think this is some public performance, Mr. Schwarzenegger?" A murmur moved through the gallery. Kamdar stood firm. "Your Honor, I must formally object to the continued hostile treatment of this witness. He's been compliant, respectful, and is under oath. If there is a concern with bias—" Langford's gavel slammed so hard it left a hairline crack in the wood. "Silence. This is my courtroom. I will not be lectured." Arnold, still seated, spoke again. "Then who holds you accountable, Your Honor?" Langford turned a shade darker. "You're overstepping, Mr. Schwarzenegger." "No," Arnold replied, his voice low, even, and perfectly projected. "You crossed the line when you turned your personal politics into a judicial vendetta." The silence was suffocating. For a moment, even Langford seemed unsure of his next move. From the back of the courtroom, a rustle. A man in a crisp gray suit stood, spectator badge clipped to his jacket. David Zhang, a federal legal observer assigned to monitor politically sensitive proceedings, was known for being unshakable. He slowly made his way forward. "Your Honor," Zhang said formally, "I've been documenting irregularities in this courtroom for the past hour. If this continues, I'll be forced to escalate my report to the Ninth Circuit Judicial Oversight Panel." Langford's face locked into a cold, mask-like expression. His eyes flicked toward Zhang, then back to Arnold. He said nothing. But the damage was done. Outside, live coverage painted a courtroom spiraling into controversy. Protesters had tripled in number. Legal commentators picked apart Langford's rulings in real time, labeling his conduct deeply partisan. Langford bias began trending alongside "Justice is not yours." Inside, the pressure cooked on. Prosecutor Julia Farnham tried to redirect the proceedings, shifting focus back to Fisk's misdeeds, but even she couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. Every objection she made, every question she asked, was now measured against the storm swirling outside. Schwarzenegger continued his testimony, never raising his voice, never stepping outside the bounds of propriety, but each answer struck with the precision of a scalpel. "No, I was not aware of the second shell company operating out of the Cayman Islands. Yes, I did ask for regular audits on our joint ventures. No, I was not privy to Mr. Fisk's communications with third-party donors. It became obvious he had nothing to hide and everything to expose. Not just about the fraud case, but about the institution supposedly designed to uphold justice." Then came the moment that shifted the ground entirely. Kamdar approached with a sealed folder. "Permission to submit supplemental exhibit. Transcript of a recent judicial seminar. Attended by Judge Langford." Langford stiffened. "On what grounds?" Kamdar didn't blink. "The transcript includes statements made by Your Honor, recorded by attendees, explicitly criticizing public figures who support progressive candidates, including Mr. Schwarzenegger. One quote in particular: 'Some of these Hollywood types think they can save the country by endorsing people like Kamala Harris. They should stick to scripts. They don't belong near policy or my courtroom.'" The gallery gasped. The jury looked stunned. Langford's face turned pale, then red. "Where did you get this?" he snapped. Kamdar didn't flinch. "Public record request." The seminar was sponsored by the Conservative Legal Accountability Forum. "Your words." "Your Honor." Arnold leaned slightly forward. "So now we all understand what this was really about." Langford stood. "Recess. Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow." He slammed the gavel and disappeared through the judge's door. An escape more than an exit, but the storm had already escaped the courthouse. Outside, an impromptu press conference began. Kamdar gave a brief statement. "We believe Mr. Schwarzenegger was subjected to politically motivated judicial misconduct. We intend to file a formal complaint." Arnold stepped forward beside her. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about what happens when those entrusted to protect the law begin using it as a weapon. We must not let the robe become a shield for personal vendettas." Reporters shouted questions. Protesters cheered. Legal analysts scrambled to keep up. And in a quiet office across town, a clerk at the Judicial Oversight Panel opened a new case file. Subject: Honier Everett Langford. Potential judicial misconduct. The reckoning was coming. By the next morning, Courtroom 7 had become the epicenter of a national reckoning. Outside, the courthouse steps overflowed with a press corps that hadn't slept, civil rights activists holding placards, law students quoting constitutional statutes, and ordinary citizens drawn by the scent of truth finally clawing its way through the cracks of power. Inside, Arnold Schwarzenegger arrived 30 minutes early. He didn't come alone. Flanking him were Sheila Kamdar and 2 men from the Department of Justice's Office of Judicial Integrity, including David Zhang, who'd returned not as an observer this time, but as a messenger of institutional scrutiny. A sealed envelope marked with a gold federal seal sat in his hand, ready for delivery. As court was called to session, Judge Everett Langford took his seat. He looked paler than the day before, his arrogance chiseled down into something tighter, more defensive. Cameras still weren't allowed inside, but the nation was watching through every word transcribed, every second interpreted by pundits and legal scholars. Before the trial could resume, Camdar rose. "Your Honor, before proceeding with testimony, we request this court recognize new evidence regarding potential judicial misconduct that may directly compromise the integrity of these proceedings." Langford straightened. "If you're referring to yesterday's exhibit—" "No, sir," she interrupted sharply. "This is formal. On behalf of Mr. Schwarzenegger and under the advisement of the Office of Judicial Integrity, we are requesting a motion to recuse." Langford's jaw locked. "On what authority?" Zhang stepped forward, breaking protocol. "Judge Langford, the oversight panel received transcripts, affidavits, and eyewitness accounts that point to a pattern of bias, specifically against individuals who have publicly supported Democratic figures. You are under investigation. Effective immediately, we are filing an emergency injunction to suspend your presiding authority pending review." Gasps shattered the room's silence. Langford stood. "This is my courtroom. I don't answer to bureaucrats or political operatives sent to coddle celebrities." Zhang didn't flinch. "You answer to the Constitution, Your Honor. And right now you're under formal scrutiny for violating the impartiality required of your office." Arnold stood for the first time that morning. Calm, steady. "This was never about my status," he said. "I've worn many titles, actor, bodybuilder, governor. But today, I came here as a citizen. And as a citizen, I have the right to face a fair court. So does every person who walks through those doors." Langford's stare lingered, but he knew he'd lost control of the courtroom, and, more importantly, the narrative. The bailiff approached, cautiously, whispering instructions from the federal order now being processed. Judge Langford stepped back from the bench. The gavel in his hand didn't fall this time. Instead, he placed it down slowly, deliberately, then walked out. Not a word. The gallery erupted, not in cheers, but in a powerful collective exhale, like a knot finally loosened in the gut of democracy. A new judge, the Honorable Dolores Wynn, an appellate court veteran known for her strict impartiality, was sworn in within the hour. The trial resumed, and under her leadership, Arnold's testimony was completed without interruption. It was detailed, direct, and damning, not just to Fisk, but to the blind trust often placed in powerful men operating unchecked behind the curtain of wealth. Landon Fisk was ultimately found guilty of 15 counts of fraud and financial manipulation, but the headlines weren't about him. They were about what happened outside the case, what exploded because of it. Schwarzenegger sparks courtroom revolution. Justice under fire. Langford suspended amid bias claims. From witness to whistleblower. Arnold's historic stand. The Judicial Oversight Panel moved quickly. In the weeks that followed, their investigation uncovered a pattern of partisan rulings spanning nearly a decade. Langford had issued harsher sentences to defendants aligned with left-leaning causes, routinely denied appeals without review, and even maintained covert communication with politically affiliated legal networks. 3 of his most recent rulings were overturned. Langford resigned under pressure, facing possible disbarment. He left the bench disgraced, but it didn't stop there. Arnold, never one to let a spotlight go to waste, took the momentum and launched Project Equal Bench, a bipartisan task force aimed at eliminating political bias in the judiciary. The initiative called for mandatory judicial bias training for all state and federal judges, oversight committees with rotating civilian seats, a national database tracking judicial misconduct and public complaints, Anonymous judicial review audits conducted by bipartisan legal scholars. Congress, feeling the weight of public pressure, passed the Judicial Accountability and Fairness Act, allocating federal funding toward reform and granting citizens expanded tools to report judicial bias. In a rare moment of political unity, both parties agreed no bench should be immune to scrutiny. Months later, Arnold stood at a podium on the steps of the very courthouse where it all began. Not as a witness, not as a former governor, not as a celebrity, but as the man who challenged the system and forced it to look in the mirror. "Injustice doesn't always come wearing a uniform or carrying a gun," he said. "Sometimes it wears a robe, and when it does, it's our duty to speak, not just for ourselves, but for the people who don't have the platform, the power, or the voice. I stood up because I could. And now, I stand with all of you, so we will." The crowd roared, not out of fandom, but solidarity. The gavel had fallen, but this time it echoed as a symbol of change, not punishment. The courtroom confrontation that began with political spite ended with nationwide reform. A single act of courage, a refusal to bow to bias, had lit the match that forced a nation to confront the impartiality of its justice system. And it all started with a late entrance and a man who refused to back down.